What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, May 29th, 2018, almost to the end of the month here, almost getting into June and summer officially here, although you wouldn't know it to feel the weather around here. Supposedly, we're going to be getting thunderstorms a little bit later in the day. Anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And I suppose we ought to start out with the war zones, emphasis on the plural. Very bizarre story that we're looking at here. This came out of the Express in Great Britain, and it's reporting on how Russian Sukhoi 34 aircraft intercepted Israeli F-16 fighters over Tripoli, even though there's supposedly a mechanism that avoids conflicts between Israel and Russia. But interestingly enough, Lebanese and Russian media outlets are claiming that two Israeli Air Force F-16s were challenged by the Sukhois over Libya. However, both Moscow and Israel are saying, no, it didn't actually happen. So we don't know exactly what's going on there. But apparently they are trying to keep things from escalating over there. Now, Israel has hit 30 military targets in the Gaza Strip in response to what they're claiming is the biggest barrage of mortar fire from the Palestinian enclave since the 2014 war. So the shooting is really cranking up. If Netanyahu wanted to start a third intifada as a distraction from Netanyahu's looming indictment for corruption, it looks like they may have succeeded. And things are definitely cranking up. And certainly for Israel, the optics on all of this look very, very bad. It is very much a David versus Goliath scenario, with Israel playing the part of Goliath. And especially after the Bloody Monday massacre, everything that Israel's doing just makes Israel look worse and worse in the eyes of the world. And then when they go around and scream, oh, you're just being an anti-Semite, and, we want to block journalists, we want to shoot journalists, we want to prevent the media from talking about this. It just makes the situation look worse than it already is. Okay, now, as you know, the F-35, despite not actually being combat ready, is starting to be delivered to some very optimistic, I would have to say, customers who are taking delivery of the aircraft and starting training with it, even though it's not in its final combat-worthy configuration. And for some reason, Israel is asking the United States to keep the F-35 upgrade capabilities secret from Turkey. And apparently this has to do with the fact that Turkey may not get the F-35 after all. Basically, Israel wants to remain the only country in the Mideast with F-35 jets to maintain its qualitative edge. Boy, are they about to be disappointed with that one. And so the discussions between Israel and the United States have focused on the jet's performance-enhancing software, and that this matter is part of the negotiations. Now, Israel has denied having talks over the F-35 deal, under which Turkey is expected to obtain 100 of these fighters. So we'll see what happens with that. Interestingly enough, Russia is now putting pressure on Iran to basically get out of Syria. Now, the Iranians are not too happy about that, but what Putin is trying to do is yank the rug out from under Israel's justification of aggressions against Syria. Because every time Israel goes into Syria, oh, we're getting the Iranians, and we're getting the Iranians. Okay, well, we're going to take the Iranians out of there, mind your own business, and stay on your side of the border. Israel won't do that, but they won't have a covering excuse. Next, they'll blame Hezbollah and Lebanon. And by the way, Russia's trying to get Hezbollah to back off as well. Between the Syrian government forces and the Russian troops, they've got this war under control. They are winning. There is no question. Putin's goal now is to deny Israel and the United States a reason to re-escalate the war, to go back on in and say, oh my goodness, Assad is gassing his own people, the Iranians are selling rugs, and the Hezbollah is cooking lunch or something like that, trying to keep that from happening. Remember, Putin has shown himself throughout the years. He is a statesman. He is trying to keep the wars under control. Now, the United States is very unhappy with Russia's proposal to sell Sukhoi 30 fighters and S-300 anti-aircraft defense systems to Iran, and is now taking the position that such sales can only be made with the approval of the United Nations Security Council. Now, this is coming out of thin air. The United States does not seek UN Security Council approval for any of their weapons sales to countries like Israel. But all of a sudden, we have to have the Security Council. They've got to do this. And basically, they're already telegraphing. If it goes to the Security Council, the United States will use their veto so that Iran does not get these weapons from Russia. And they're saying it's obvious we are not interested in Iran having advanced fighters and ground systems. We'll use all available means to oppose any systems that Iran may use for offensive purposes. Now, there are a couple of problems with that. First of all, the S-300 is clearly a defensive system, not offensive. It's an air defense system. It can't be used for offensive purposes. The second issue is, of course, that Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in about 200 years, contrasting with the United States, which these days can't seem to go for 6 months without bombing or drone striking or regime changing someplace. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network, and we're going to take a phone call from Bruce in Texas. Aloha, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Michael. You hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Super duper. Have you been paying attention to the big brouhaha about Roseanne Barr's tweet?
Yeah, I was going to mention that a little further in the show, but we can talk about that now if you want.
Yeah, I just want to throw something maybe you want to look into. If you can pull up her original tweet. I don't have it in front of me at the moment. I saw it a few minutes ago. But she was tweeting back to the SGT report. Have you ever heard of the SGT report?
No, I just remember reading her actual tweet where she basically made a comment about one of the White House staff, I think it was Valerie Jarrett, being the offspring of the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes.
Right. But I think the reason why they took this and blew it way out of proportion and went after her and make an example of her is the SGT report. Look up on YouTube. They're a 9/11 truther site, and they're also pretty hard on the Zionist angle. And I think that has a large element to do with it. They got like a gotcha moment to punish her and to basically make an example out of her to the rest of the entertainment industry. Just something I want to bring up, and maybe you want to look into it when you have a chance.
Well, you may be right. You may be right. It was a very popular show, and apparently Roseanne Barr's character portrayal is very conservative, very pro-Trump, and probably rubbed a lot of liberals in Hollywood the wrong way. So they may have been looking for an excuse to just shut her program down. Yeah,
that's true too. That's exactly true. But just take a look at the SGT report there on YouTube, and you see what I'm talking about. That's who she was. She was replying to them and somebody else. And I'm sure that there are watchers there that keep an eye on the celebrities, or who the hell are you talking to, type of deal.
Oh,
anyway,
no question about it.
The next topic. Appreciate it, Michael. You do a good job there.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to let you go. And I will take a look at that. Yes. This really, it does strike me as an overreaction. Now, I'm not defending Roseanne Barr. I've never been a huge fan of hers anyway. And it was a very personal and offensive tweet. Unfortunately, under the liberal political correctness movement, we've all been encouraged to have very thin skins and be offended about absolutely everything that comes our way. And I think that's counterproductive. I think we all need to grow very thick skins, and just our response to anything that might be offensive is, big deal. That's your opinion. Who cares? We go on about our lives and we get things done instead of always running around looking for something to be offended by. Over in India, they have announced that they will comply with United Nations sanctions on Iran, but not sanctions from the United States. This is a trend that we're starting to see all around the globe, where the U.S. says, we're sanctioning these people and we're sanctioning those people, and the rest of the world is saying, okay, go ahead and sanction them. We're not going to be part of this anymore because your sanctions are hurting our economy. It's depriving us of our marketplaces to sell our products. So you can go on and sanction all that you want, but we're not going to take part in it. And that is a growing move. And the U.S. is sanctioning itself into isolation here. For some reason, Poland has decided they want a permanent U.S. military base on their soil to the extent where they're willing to pay $2 billion with a B for that base to be there. And they've issued a policy paper, 39 pages long, talking about how extraordinarily strong Polish and U.S. relations have been throughout history, and how the Polish people are remarkably pro-Western during the Cold War, how they fought against communism, and how they agreed to hate the Soviet Union. Moscow is saying this is a provocation. When the former Soviet Union collapsed, NATO made an agreement that they were not going to migrate further eastward, and yet they have been. And that's why Russia's feeling threatened. Down in Israel, they had this annual conference of the Israeli Bar Association in Eilat. Avichai Mandelblit are saying police are wrapping the probe into the Bezek Wallah affair involving Netanyahu, and they're saying there's likely to be indictments, and mentioned that Netanyahu's coalition is trying to find some way to undermine the high court's authority, to basically yank the rug out and find some way that they can protect Netanyahu from being indicted and tried, which shows how widespread corruption is in Israel. Almost as widespread as it is in Washington, D.C. The shooting is continuing between Israel and Gaza. Apparently, Palestinian fighters have launched a heavy barrage of mortar fire against Israel on Tuesday. Israeli aircraft struck back. 3 Israeli soldiers were wounded by shrapnel after dozens of mortar bombs and rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip, triggering warning sirens in southern Israel throughout the day. There are no immediate reports of Palestinian casualties. So they're definitely firing. And like I said, Netanyahu may be trying to provoke a third intifada as a distraction from his pending charges of corruption. Over in the Mediterranean, the Israeli Navy has succeeded in stopping the boats of wounded Palestinians trying to break the siege on Gaza. Now, there are a lot of people who were wounded by those Israeli butterfly bullets, and the hospitals inside Gaza can't deal with it. So they're literally putting these wounded people on boats and trying to get them out of Gaza, somewhere where they can get to the West Bank, or if necessary, over to Cyprus. And the Israeli Navy has stopped them and turned them back and said, you're not allowed to go to better medical care, just go ahead and amputate the limb and all will be well here. Now, do you remember the last false flag chemical attack in Syria, where it basically, the U.S. went on in and deployed a huge number of Tomahawk cruise missiles to blow up a bunch of buildings which turned out not to have chemical weapons in them, again. But in one case, they blew up a compounding pharmacy. It was a place that made medications. In fact, they made cancer medications because of the sanctions on Syria. Syria cannot buy cancer medications from elsewhere in the world, so they make their own. And apparently, they've invented 3 that actually work. Well, we have to destroy those. We've got to protect America's pharmaceutical industry. We've got to blow up Syria's cancer treatments before they just get out there and spoil the party for everybody. So, but I digress. It was reported during that attack that some of the Tomahawks landed very gently. And this has now been confirmed because apparently at least one of those Tomahawks was recovered pretty much intact. And it has been taken to Russia, where they have taken it apart, and they're learning all the little secrets about what's inside. The radio guidance, the GPS guidance, the optical guidance, every little tiny detail that they are then going to use to improve their weapons and their countermeasures. So it's just like when Iran spoofed that U.S. drone, brought it down on Iranian territory, and now they're making copies of it. Turning to the domestic news here, as you know, we are hearing all these stories about Russian agents, FBI agents who want to come forward and testify about the mishandling of the Trump-Russia collusion case by Robert Mueller, by James Comey, and these other people. And even as a new Rasmussen poll is showing, a majority of voters believe senior law enforcement officials broke the law to stop Donald Trump from beating Hillary Clinton in 2016. Apparently, orders are now coming down from higher up, warning FBI agents not to testify, not to volunteer to testify, not to say anything, because apparently the whistleblower protection laws are considered ineffective, and FBI management will not guarantee the safety and protection of any FBI agents who start telling stories, even in response to a congressional subpoena. So once again, we're seeing that even the current senior management of the FBI is enforcing the cover-up. Don't you dare talk. Don't you dare tell Congress what we've been up to. Bad things will happen to you. Just stay quiet. Don't tell anybody anything. That's your job. They might as well put a flashing neon sign on their forehead that blinks. Guilty, 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 guilty. Over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is out there saying that at this point it's obvious the FBI and the Department of Justice cannot be trusted to fairly evaluate whether to release Spygate and other documents about the targeting of President Trump. Of course they can't. They're covering up their own participation. They're covering up their own crimes. We need a special prosecutor to go into the FBI and the Department of Justice, somebody who's willing to go on in there with a pair of presidential brass knuckles and say, you are obligated to give us this information. You are obligated to tell us what's going on. I think we ought to get Larry Klayman up there. I know he wants the job. If you go down to Freedom Watch, it's right there on the front page. He wants that job, and I wish he could get it. Anyway, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right to the phones here. Terry in Long Beach. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, those comments you made about Putin, trying to get, Iran out of Syria and calming everything down. His strategy could be, I want to keep everything cool until the whole Western world implodes under its own weight, and then we can avoid war. And the reason I say that is Deutsche Bank is overextended on derivatives, and they had those problems. I think you mentioned it too. They're laying off 10,000 people, and when that goes, maybe it won't be long, and then it'll set up a domino effect. Spain, Portugal, other Europe, and the European Union come apart, and then it'll spread to the banking system in the United States, and that'll go down, and then the whole Western world will be defeated under its own weight, and he won't have to, take a chance on any nuclear war or anything. I don't know what you think about that.
No, you're probably right. I mean, Putin doesn't want war, and contrary to the fear-mongering propaganda we're getting, he doesn't want to invade and conquer Europe or the United States. He's got enough problems taking care of Russia. And if you look at Europe and the United States right now, there's almost no reason to invade here. Our economies are in a shambles. The infrastructure is worn down. There really isn't much point to it. There's nothing here. What's he going to do? Invade and set up fast food restaurants at the Grand Canyon and Yosemite? But really, there isn't much point at all. What Putin has been trying to do all along is not let the United States lash out in its death throes and ignite war all over the planet. And so your analysis, I agree with it. I think it's a good one. That Putin just wants to prevent the United States from escalating World War III any more than it already is, knowing that the United States is headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse.
Right. And, I don't know what they plan behind the scenes. I don't know if the New World Order people, of course, I think they want a digital currency, but they want it centrally controlled, not like the blockchain. And, of course, that way they'll keep track of all your spending and all that, no more cash, and it was just more control over the people. But the first thing they got to do is disarm everybody with these false flags like these school shootings and stuff,
Yes.
And the Congress will go right along with it, because I was surprised about what percentage of the Congress is dual citizens now. I just think of that as neocons in the executive branch, but I understand there's a lot in Congress now too, and I think they're all part of that, are supporting that New World Order thing. Like back in '65, it was Jacob Javits, Zionist, and more, that changed the whole immigration laws, because they know that they want to break up unity. Because they don't want to block against them. So they can bring these people and dilute the whole population. They'll have control. And, of course, Obama is part of it, because he was known as a food stamp president. So the more people on food stamp, the more get over the people.
Yeah, they want everybody to be dependent on the government so that nobody will stand up and say what the government is doing is wrong. I remember it was only a couple of years ago, they were actually running TV commercials saying, go ahead, sign up for food stamps. And it was like, come on, taxes are already completely out of control. We don't need to get people onto food stamps. We need to bring back the jobs. Because the vast majority of the American people to be on welfare or food stamps is very insulting. They don't want to be living on handouts. They want to be actually doing something. They want to have that pride of craftsmanship, of doing a good job, of earning their money, not just being given it. To see the government literally sell this idea that, yes, it's cool to be just living off the handouts. That's not what the American culture is supposed to be about.
No, and that's where the pre-cell phones came in too. You can look a person that's got a job, on the dole of government. But Trump, ran on the Make America Great Again, bring back the jobs from Europe. But I don't even think that's possible anymore. Do you?
No, I really don't. I mean, if you look at the total scale of not just U.S. government debt, but corporate debt and private debt, we pretty much run our course. There's no way out of it unless the government is willing to simply dissolve the Federal Reserve and simply say the debt is forgiven. And it's happened in history, but the bankers don't want to forgive debt. Not because they expect to be paid back that debt, but because they can use that debt as an instrument of control over the nation and its people. That's what the bankers are really after. Control of the debt means control of the nation. Anyway, we're going to let you go here because we're coming up on another commercial break here. And when we come on back, we're going to be talking more about the economic news. Boy, rough day on the Dow for those of you who actually have stocks and bonds. And we'll be back in a few minutes after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to talk about the economic news for a while. And for those of you watching on YouTube, yes, I am wearing my I Survived the Hawaii Ballistic Missile t-shirt. And I'm wearing it for a reason, specifically today, because when we were down at the mall at the bottom of the hill, we noticed the store where Claire had bought me this shirt has already gone out of business. And that's a shame because it's actually a high-quality t-shirt and high-quality printing. And I wanted to get a few more. I actually wanted to make up a shirt for what we call Jurassic Park, which is kind of an inside joke going back to when we got married. Jurassic Park had just come out. We honeymooned on Kauai, where much of the film was shot. And so I did a parody of the logo. And it's Jurassic Park, when church music ladies ruled the earth. Cafe Press will not allow me to make a shirt out of it because apparently it's too close to the original copyrighted logo, which I don't think so. I mean, you know, I never saw a T-Rex with a conductor's baton in the movie. But it's just another reminder that this is not a very healthy economy right now. And they've already got somebody else's coming on in to start a business in that same retail space. But there's a lot of retail vacancies in the mall right now. Claire and I are having to deal with the reality that Toys R Us are gone. Babies R Us are gone. And yes, there's a nearby Walmart that has a toy section. But unfortunately, it's stuff that all comes branded from movies and TV shows. And that's something that's really kind of missing from toys today. The freedom for children to use their own imagination as opposed to simply role play in some corporate entertainment show. You know, oh, look, I am superhero this, or I am fairy princess that, and I don't get to come up with my own identity or my own make-believe. And I think that is, I think it's actually harmful to children. And what I really miss are good science toys. Now, when I was a kid, high school age, I lived in Southern California with my family, and there was a strip mall, and they had a toy store. And the front part of it was the stuff you would normally expect to see in a toy store, G.I. Joe and bicycles and Barbie dolls and all the rest of it. But the back section was all science toys. Racks of chemistry ware, Bunsen burners, bottles of chemicals, where you could just go on in and buy what you needed to conduct your experiments. And it was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot about chemistry from having that resource there. And the last time I saw a chemistry set at Toys R Us, it was this little booklet of pieces of paper that were saturated with certain chemicals, and you'd press them together to get your reaction. And I don't know if that's just because our society doesn't encourage kids to mess with chemicals any longer, or some lawyers got involved and said, oh, no, there's a liability. I mean, you know, the child could hurt themselves. They could poison the dog unless we do it this way. But it does seem very limiting, and I do miss it. And I still have to find some place that will do this Jurassic Park t-shirt for Claire. Anyway, as one of our callers mentioned earlier in the program, Deutsche Bank has laid off 10,000 employees. That is not a good sign at all. And of course, we know Deutsche Bank has been caught in all these scandals going over the last few months. It was a bad day for the stock market. The Dow Jones closed 391 down, NASDAQ 37 down, S&P 500 31 down. So yeah, it was not particularly good. Not a good sign, not a good start to the week here. Okay, now let's do this. And getting on back to the economic news here. Apparently, despite some very positive developments in the discussions with China, the White House has now slapped a 25% tariff on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods. And what does that mean? Well, until the U.S. is able to manufacture those same goods, it means that they're still going to be imported from China. They're going to be 25% more expensive. Who's going to pay for that? You will. You will. And these $50 billion worth of Chinese goods includes the high-tech sector, where China manufactures things like tablets and smartphones, because we actually can't in this country. Now, apparently this morning, the U.S. Department of Justice has approved the merger of German pharmaceutical giant Bayer with Monsanto, two of the world's most scandalous and corrupt business entities are now going to become one giant monopoly over the planet. Of course, we all know Monsanto gave the world wonderful things like Agent Orange, GMOs, glyphosate. Bayer is notorious for discovering that its medication made for hemophiliacs was tainted with the AIDS virus, and they just went ahead and sold it in other parts of the world where there were no laws restricting that sort of thing. So these two monstrous companies are now going to be one big monstrous companies. The White House intends to follow through with a pledge to place tariffs on imported Chinese technology goods, while also tightening restrictions on investment by Chinese firms into American companies. This is basically a follow-up to the story we did about the 25% tariff on $50 billion worth of Chinese high-tech goods. So if you thought $1,000 for the iPhone 10 was stiff, get ready for that to go up to $1,200. And apparently a big issue is still going on regarding intellectual property violations by China. That is a serious issue. That is something the Chinese are doing that does need to be dealt with. And China basically, because we've allowed them to manufacture things like the iPhone and the iPad, they have all that they need to make their own versions. And they don't have to amortize the R&D cost, so they can make these things very, very inexpensive. China's kind of a mixed blessing. On one hand, they can produce very high quality manufactured goods. And on the other hand, they can also produce some very cheaply made stuff. So it's a mixed blessing. Now, the intellectual property issue is kind of complicated. And one of the reasons why China may feel that it's okay for them to sort of cheat the system is because originally in the United States, there was a limited time period for patents and copyrights, so that the original creator of whatever was being patented or copyright would enjoy a reasonable return on their inventiveness and creativity. But that after that, what had been invented and created would enter the public domain and be a benefit to civilization as a whole. That was the original intent. Unfortunately, large corporations started lobbying for open-ended patents and copyright, permanent ownership. And that went against that process. And the biggest lobbyist of all, of course, was Walt Disney. When the copyright on Mickey Mouse was due to expire, the Disney lawyers just went crazy and said, no, 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 we have to keep, this is our brand. This is our icon. This has to be a permanent copyright. And the government went along with it. So the system is being abused from both ends by those who are ignoring copyright and those who are exploiting copyright beyond its original purpose. So it is a complex issue, and there's a lot of gray area in there. Okay, the United States is going after Russian account holders in the banks of Cyprus. And apparently the Russians keeping their cash in the Cypriot banks have been caught up in a massive audit of accounts by lenders and watchdogs in Cyprus. And this was triggered by pressure from Washington. Banks in Cyprus now require Russian customers to confirm earnings and tax payments, to produce bank statements for the past year, as well as estate documents. And I'm getting that internet warning again. And let's see. Okay, hopefully, there we are. All right. We're having some internet issues today. Okay, all right, there we are. So we're talking about banks in Cyprus. We're talking about Russian customers. We're talking about pressure from the U.S. government, more goading of the Russians. Let's just poke the Russians a little bit more. So the Cyprus banks are offering their Russian customers a choice. They can either close their accounts or transfer their funds to Russian Commercial Bank, a subsidiary of Russian state-run lender VTB. And I imagine they'll probably do that as well. Russia continues to build up its stockpile of physical gold. And Putin is now sounding a warning, saying that U.S. sanctions are actually hurting trust in the dollar as a reserve currency. And he is absolutely correct. People around the world have come to understand that if you are using the U.S. dollar, that you could be hit with sanctions by the United States without any warning whatsoever. And that's actually accelerating nations to move away from the U.S. dollar and look at some kind of a currency that is actually under their control and not the control of the U.S. government. Remember what I said before, the U.S. is literally sanctioning itself into isolation. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. Basically, we're starting to see what looks like a significant fracture in the European Union coming out of Italy. And that's because the European Union has turned out to be something very different than what was told to the people of Europe. They were originally told it was just all about free trade and free travel. That was it. Now we're finding out, thanks to some declassified documents in Great Britain, that it was always intended that Europe be brought together and federalized and placed under the control of Brussels. And the people of Europe are not happy with that. They're not happy with the European Central Bank. So the original Euro community concept that was made public was this wonderful ideal because it emphasized the rights of all citizens of member states, guaranteeing them a range of protections from unjust and stupid demagogues. Unfortunately, the neoliberal corporatist globalists took over the machinery and turned it over to a gang of cold-hearted technocrats who used the once estimable governance structure to enforce a draconian monetarist policy. And if you want an example, look at what happened down in Greece. So more and more we are hearing from inside the EU that the EU's days may be numbered. Right now, the euro is in serious trouble. Italy is in panic mode at the center of the euro collapse. And there's a huge, huge debt contagion. And again, that's what you get when you have a private central bank. Because private central banks, by design, create more debt than money with which to pay the debt until the debt crushes the system. And that's exactly what's happening both in Europe and the United States. Now, interestingly enough, despite all this talk about sanctions against Iran, there is a Chinese investment firm that is getting ready to invest $2 billion, or their equivalent of it, building an oil refinery in the Iranian northern province of Mazandaran. So Iran is open for business. China is saying, yeah, we're actually going to go on in there. And both Chinese and Russian firms are expected to continue to invest in Iran. And they will actually benefit from the U.S. withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, because the U.S. is hitting Iran with all these sanctions. Some European countries and companies are still being very cautious about getting to Iran. But gee whiz, what was the end result? Iran is doing business with Russia and China, not the United States and not Europe. And it's just another reminder of how poorly thought out all this sanctions nonsense was. Iran's going to do just fine. China's going to do fine. Russia's going to do fine. The United States and its allies in Europe are in serious economic trouble. Neither of the economies of the EU or the US are resilient enough to survive any kind of economic war, sanctions, or trade war. Apparently, the United States, in between putting tariffs on all the Chinese products, is pushing China to buy oil and gas from the United States. And Beijing has been given a list of goods that China buys in other countries that can be replaced by American ones. The list includes oil, oil products, liquefied natural gas, beef, poultry, and soybeans. I don't know how this is going to work on out. When you are out there throwing tariffs on Chinese products and then you turn around and say, well, you need to buy all this stuff from us and not from other countries. I don't know what the thinking is behind this, but this is not going to work on out. We got to take a break here for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm looking at the situation evolving with China and how the U.S. government is once again resorting to bullying and bellicosity as foreign policy. And I don't understand how the U.S. imagines it's going to work on one hand to throw tariffs on Chinese products coming to the United States of America, and then turn around and demand that China buy U.S.-made products over those provided currently by other countries. I don't think this is going to end well. I don't think it's going to end well at all. Apparently, Dixon's car phone is going to close 92 of its 650 stores following a profit warning, which sent shares tumbling 20%. And the firm expects pre-tax profits to be 382 million pounds for 2017-2018, but already predicts profits to fall to just 300 million pounds in 2018-2019. So everywhere there are indications the economies of the West are slowing down. People don't have high-paying jobs. The money junkies have grabbed all the money. This rush to automation is a dead end. It absolutely is going to be a dead end. Taken to its extreme, we're going to see shopping malls staffed with robots standing around with nothing to do because there won't be any human customers coming on in to spend money. Over in Europe, specifically Denmark, they're trying to deal with the culture shock issues that have been brought up by the refugee crisis. And so Denmark is now going to force children in residential areas where the immigrants and refugees have settled to be educated about democracy, equality, and the major Danish holidays such as Christmas. And I can already see the liberals out there saying, oh, no, you can't do that. You've got to respect their culture and their traditions. Well, that's a two-way street. We're seeing a lot of these refugees who disrespect our culture, our holidays. Now, over the last weekend, there was a picture that was circulating all over social media and corporate media. And it was basically a picture of these migrant children in the U.S. literally sleeping in a cage. And CNN journalist Haras Gold, New York Times Magazine editor-in-chief Jake Silverstein, Obama speechwriter John Facro, and Women's March co-founder Linda Sansor basically all went on out and said, oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. Look at how Trump's immigration people are treating children. And it turned out it was an old photo taken under the Obama administration. They didn't check the date. We'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's go ahead and take a phone call from Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I was looking at the market today, and it looks to me like the dollar is really starting to rally pretty good, and that's not going to bar too well with President Trump, who, of course, wants a cheap dollar, a dollar that's not worth as much. So he probably thinks that. We could export a lot more goods for cheap.
Yes.
But in reality, what I see is, a dollar that is reserve world currency, global currency, and I see a strong dollar that it's going to put a lot of pressure on the debt that's been accumulated over all of these years, and that's not going to be too good for the stock market, I don't think.
Well, the stock market had a really rough day today, but you need to understand that here in the United States, our debt is denominated in those dollars. And so the actual real world value of the dollar and the debt go up and down together. And the fact that the dollar is worth more doesn't actually reduce our debt one tiny bit. That's just the reality of how these things work. In order for a rising dollar to have an impact on the debt, the dollar would have to rise, be converted to a different currency entirely, then the dollar would have to go down, and that money brought back from that other currency into dollars, at which point you'd have more dollars and you could do something about the debt. But operating internally to the United States of America, the dollar and the debt go up and down together.
Yeah, I can't see a way that we're going to be able to get out of this because the government is so fragmented politically. I think the right thing to do would probably be to address central banks. But you know what? You got all central banks, so that it's probably not going to happen. What would be good would be to back it up with it's backed up with the confidence in the U.S. government right now because we don't have gold anymore. So what I say is why don't we just make our own notes and and just get rid of the central bank, and and maybe when this crisis comes, whenever it blows up. But you know what? It's so, like I said, the government is so divided, and the people are so divided. I think people are hoping Trump gets in again, because I mean we're headed for disaster, and I don't think the Democrats are going to be able to get out of this.
No.
Jubilee. Go ahead.
No, I was agreeing with you. Looking at the economic situation, it is way past the point of being recoverable, and it's complicated by the fact that the politicians in Washington, D.C. Think it's just fine. They're getting lots of campaign donations from Wall Street and the Federal Reserve, and so they're just going to keep on following the policies dictated by Wall Street and the Federal Reserve until it all falls off the edge of a cliff.
Yeah, I wonder what's going to happen first, whether we're going to default on our debts or the Europe is going to, what is it called? Separate into, back into their own currencies, after it's France and, remember the Portugal and the pigs, remember the acronym, the pigs,
Yes.
Once all of them start to default and go, and start, and it's all, and it gets all broken up. You wonder what if that's going to be. Maybe that's going to be the catalyst for us. I don't know. And then today again, Israel. I guess there's a whole lot of missiles going off, and that situation right there isn't helping either. So it's going to be an interesting week. I got to say. Now we're down to weeks. We're not down to years or months. We're down to weeks, and pretty soon it'll be days. How many days do you think we have left?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. One of the things that makes prognostication difficult is that the government and the banks are basically changing the rules. And so when we figure out an estimated time for the collapse based on the current system, then the system gets changed to basically delay the collapse, and we have to go back to trying to figure out when it's going to happen. I'll be very honest. I thought it was going to collapse long before we reached this point. I know it's coming. I don't know when is the best that I can do. It could happen very easily this year.
Yeah, one thing I do worry about people is the banning of cash and making everything, electronic. Not only your DBT benefits and like that, just no more cash, because that's going to throw people into a real situation where everybody's going to be forced to pay, and again that will lead to probably abuse in itself. But I don't know. I hope this collapse we keep talking about. I hope it. I guess maybe it will entitle. I mean, it will require that they ban cash. And boy, that's just going to be a train wreck, I believe.
Yeah, it will be. It will be. And what you need to do is you need to look at the evolution of money through the history of the United States. Because when this country was first set up, there was no such thing as a personal income tax. There was no IRS. The money actually had intrinsic value because it was made out of silver, nickel, and copper. The coins had real physical worth. And so you were basically free to earn your money by your own labor and then go and spend it wherever you wanted. And it was a world in which if you didn't want to involve a bank in your affairs, you didn't have to. You just kept your money and you did your business and you lived your life. And then bit by bit, the bankers started saying, we want to have control over the money in our society. And
right.
We want to, starting 100 years ago, they took away the honest economic system that this country had been founded on. And they reimposed the same kind of debt slavery that we'd fought the revolution to be free of, which was a private central bank creating money out of thin air and then lending it into circulation at interest. And the economic decline in the lives of the American people basically followed on from that. Well, now they want all the money that's out there under their control. They don't want you to have money in your pocket, even though they've taken the intrinsic value out of the coinage back in the 60s. Those little slugs that you're allowed to play with aren't really worth anything anymore. But they want to take that away as well. And they want to do it, first of all, for the reason that you said, complete control and surveillance over what you're spending your money on. But more importantly, is to not have a mechanism for people to pull their wealth out of the banks if there's a banking crisis. You've all heard the phrase, a run on the bank. When people get scared the bank may be in trouble, they walk down there or they run down there, they pound on the doors and they say, give me my money, I want to close my savings account. And if there is no more cash, then the banks can simply say, we have nothing to give you. Your money is stored in our bank's computers, and we're sorry, there's no way for you to just take it away from here. All we can do is move it to another bank, and they're of course free to move it back and forth to cover all these losses. But that, I think, is the real reason they're pushing for a cashless society, is so that it's impossible for there to be a run on the bank. You know, screw the people, protect the banks here. And by the way, the problems with a cashless society, we had another incident. Claire and I actually went through a fast food drive-through restaurant the other day. We were in a rush. We couldn't get home. And their computers had gone down. And they literally had a sign, if you don't have cash, we cannot sell you any food. So that's going to be the big problem about it. Mike, anything else?
All right, great. Yeah, well, yeah, we'll talk again about that, you know, the echo of universal income. I mean, you know, you think it's ludicrous now, but after there's a crisis, oh, please give us our we need it. We got to have it. Please give it to us. You know, go to the government and beg to be saved, you know.
Yeah, but who's going to pay for it?
Later, so.
Who's going to pay for it? The people who've got all the money right now, the money junkies, they're going to resist higher taxes. In fact, Trump has lowered their taxes. This idea of a universal basic income, which strikes me as communistic in conception, again, who's going to pay for it?
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Mike, have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Mike. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. So we were talking about this photo that went on out showing some migrant children asleep in a cage. Looked like a dog kennel, and everybody just went ballistic and say, oh, look at how Trump is maltreating all of these illegal immigrant children, those poor children. And then it turned out the photo actually dates back to the Obama administration. So got to check your sources, got to check those dates here. Apparently, over in Germany, Angela Merkel is coming under pressure from the ruling party to basically start normalizing ties with Russia. And this is not the only country where we're seeing this happen. The more belligerent the United States gets in its foreign policy, the more of a bully it shows itself to be, the more and more other countries are pivoting away from the United States, and they're pivoting toward Russia and China. And now it's starting to happen in Germany. George Soros is out there pushing a campaign to have a second Brexit referendum, and he's pouring apparently a huge amount of money into it to basically sell Britons on the idea that they need to stay as part of the European Union, even though Soros himself is admitting that the Brussels project is in an existential crisis with all the different countries that are straining at the leash, that are refusing the open borders concept. You've got Italy, Poland, Hungary, Great Britain. But Soros is out there insisting that if Great Britain quits the European Union, it will be damaging for Great Britain, and the anti-Brexit group Best for Britain, which he helped fund, will unveil a manifesto calling for a second vote on the final deal in the coming days. In other words, we'll just keep having elections until we get the result that we want. To heck with democracy. I mean, really. So let's get back to Tommy Robinson. We talked about him yesterday. And apparently his arrest and imprisonment has triggered a global outcry. Now, apparently he was arrested for, breaking the peace or some such nonsense, but videos have surfaced about the encounter between Tommy Robinson and the police, and he was just talking in a normal level of voice on his cell phone. And the cops just came on up and grabbed him, and now there is a free Tommy Robinson meme out there on Twitter. There are protests all over the world, especially in Great Britain. And again, the concern is why the British government is basically protecting the Islamic culture from exposure of some of the things that they're doing. Well, unfortunately, because the vast majority of Islamic migrants vote Labour. So you have a problem where the government won't enforce the law against this voting bloc, just like we have here in the United States, where the Democrats count on the illegal immigrants and the refugees to vote Democrat. And that appears to be what was going on over there. But it has caused a bit of a stir, caused a really ugly stir over there. Talk about creeping dictatorship here. Again, Great Britain. Retiring Luton Crown Court Judge Nick Madge is out there responding to the soaring knife crime rate, particularly among the refugees, by saying that basically the points of kitchen knives need to be filed down. That's going to be his solution, ignoring how quickly they can be refiled to a point if you want to. There's actually a kind of knife that technically doesn't have a point. It's called a pigfoot blade, but you can slash with it. And that's why the judge's idea isn't going to work. It may make stabbings a little less deep, but you can still slash with the edge of a kitchen knife. And you need to look at what's going on here. Disarmament isn't going to work. You can't take away everybody's knives. It's just not going to happen. But apparently in the past 2 months, there have been 77 knife-related incidents in Bedfordshire, including 3 deaths. And Judge Madge basically said these offenses often seem motiveless. One boy was stabbed because he had an argument a couple of years before at his junior school. So my question would be, does the perpetrator, are they on prescription antidepressants? Now, let's see. Interestingly enough, Fox News is also carrying the story about how open borders liberals are still apparently tweeting around that picture of these kids in a cage and trying to say that this is Trump's doing when it actually goes back to Obama. I've been watching the TV. They're still going on and on about Roseanne getting canceled. Like, this is the big story. I'm sorry, I didn't even watch the show. I didn't watch it when it originally came on out. I'm not a big fan of Roseanne. Again, it was a tacky, over-the-line tweet, but I think ABC was looking for a reason to dump the show anyway, and she just handed it to them on a silver platter. But again, I see our entire culture as having become very thin-skinned, too easy to offend, and we're running around either looking for reasons to be offended or trying very hard not to be offensive. It's just come to dominate our entire lives, and I really don't think that should work. All right, let's take a phone call here from Glenn in Alabama. Glenn, welcome to the show. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
I'll make it fast. Tommy Robinson, this judge who did this to him, why is not anyone calling for that judge to be disciplined?
It's a good question. I mean,
why? You've got all these demonstrations, all these people, all these protests. Why isn't someone calling for this judge to be kicked out of office? It's a good way to deal with that particular case, and it's a good way to send a message to a lot of those people. Don't ever do this to us again.
Well, unfortunately, under the letter of the law, the judge hasn't done anything technically illegal, which he would have to in order to be removed. It is an abuse of the law, no question about it, to have done this to Tommy. But again, we'll see what's going to happen when the public furor continues to build. Anyway, Glenn, we're going to let you go. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones here. Mike in Virginia. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, great show today. I was wondering if you could help me out. I've got a couple of questions that I read from your excellent website about General Electric. And the first question I have is, what's behind the precipitous drop in the stock price of GE? I thought GE was a solid company. I thought it was doing well. Could you riddle me that one, Batman?
Well, as you know, I'm not in the stock market, and I'm not really watching too many of the companies very closely. But I would presume that, like so many other companies, GE's quarterly earnings report didn't come out very well. I mean, the market pretty much dropped all across the board on all the exchanges. So it wasn't just GE.
Well, I mean, their stock price went from like in a few short years went from like 200 down to 0.
I'm not the person who can explain that, and you'd have to talk to somebody who's actually an analyst who's looking at General Electric. I don't have that information.
Okay, well, I appreciate your honesty and attempt. But because instead of trying to BS your way through an answer that might be half right, but I just want to put in a plug for your website. All you listeners out there, Rivero's website this is my go-to place. I can't think of a better one to go to for news. There's no slant. There's no agenda. Just articles that you won't ordinarily find anywhere else, and it's really quite a treasure. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words here, and we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. The phone lines are open again, 800-313-9443. Apparently, I just did a web search, and it's basically showing, it was third quarter profit deterioration, more than Wall Street feared. So apparently they have earnings issues. Somebody just sent me this article saying that there seems to be a double standard out there. This is getting back to the Roseanne Barr situation. I don't think she should have tweeted what she tweeted, but on the other hand, you're punishing everybody on the show by canceling it. The other talent, the camera operators, the lighting guys, what did they do to deserve losing their job? And somebody sent me this article. We just put it up at whatreallyhappened.com about how Jimmy Kimmel, literally as part of his show, has women grope his crotch on air for laughs. But that's not considered crossing the line or insensitive, and he still has his program. I think ABC wanted to cancel the show. It was doing very well in the ratings, but again, it was a big push for conservatism and Trump support. And I think ABC they were waiting for an excuse to cancel the show. And Roseanne just handed it to them on a silver platter. Okay, now, apparently over at the United Nations, they just issued a report detailing a rather nasty scandal that's been going on for over a decade. It's an 84-page report showing that the top charities who were bringing food into these African countries were bartering that food for sexual favors. And apparently this report was handed over to the UN all the way back in 2002 and kept under wraps all that time. Now, basically, the report claims that workers at more than 40 aid organizations, of which 15 are major international charities, including Save the Children and Médecins Sans Frontières, were caught sexually exploiting young refugees. That's just tacky. That is really just tacky. And you have to, I don't know. I should be used to it by now. I've been on this planet Earth right now. I've seen the human condition long enough where I should have become cynical about all this. But no matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up with some of the stuff that's going on. I really can't. All right, we're coming up on another commercial break. We've got a caller waiting on the line. We're going to get to that when we get on back. They're going to be talking about, well, just all kinds of things to talk about. So please feel free to join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors, so please stay tuned. And as I said, we'll be back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're going to go back to the phones here. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Who exactly do you think you are, insinuating that we Americans are too easily offended? Like, who made you the arbiter of what constitutes a reasonable response? That's repugnant to the First Amendment. I call upon the listeners to boycott you over this foolish remark.
Okay, point taken.
Okay, I just couldn't resist. I want to mention something about my name. My name is Glenn. There was a Glenn from Alabama, and there's a Glenn in one of the commercials. It's like it's not that prevalent a name, and yet I see it popping up in various places. Go figure.
Well, there's a lot of Glens around. There's a lot of Mikes calling into the show, I've been noticing today. And so it's not like we have trademarked our names. It's just what we're called.
I think. Okay, I thought maybe the NSA was seeding the internet.
No, I don't think so.
But about the trade deficit with China, I can see grossing. I don't mind the tariff thing per se, because everybody tariffs the heck out of ours, and we're the only ones dumb enough to use tariffs to try and, even out trade imbalances a bit. But in terms of telling people where to buy stuff, I mean, I don't want anybody telling me where to buy my shoes or my clothes or my food or my gas. So, and if I were one of the other countries that's currently selling that stuff, I'd be a little annoyed at America trying to muscle in and tell somebody not to buy my stuff. So that doesn't seem like a good idea. But the tariff component isn't, necessarily utterly foolish, and doesn't necessarily represent a trade war either. It's just what everybody does.
Well, I'm looking at the mixed signals China is being sent, throwing tariffs on the products they export to the United States, and then the U.S. turns around and demands that China, rather than buying certain products from other countries, has to buy them from the United States. And
right, I agree. I understand that's not likely to work, but the tariffs themselves are not inherently unreasonable. China has a vast supply of dirt cheap labor. The production has all been shifted over there and, set up over there and that sort of thing. And then China's buying up real estate and all kinds of stuff here in the U.S. like crazy. I mean, they're taking us to the cleaners pretty well, and actually it seems like it was set up that way when you look at how these businesses got transferred over there, and they were subsidized with tax breaks and profit shortfalls for initial setup and all that kind of stuff. It's a pretty corrupt mess. So it's not going to get solved overnight. But I mean, it does, like you say, it doesn't pay for us to be bellicose with China. That's a bit foolish. So.
No, and there's a great deal of foolishness just in the management of this nation's manufacturing going back 30 years. And a part of that is because we raised this culture of executives with MBAs who were disconnected from the actual production process. And so they figured, we'll just send it overseas. And nobody was thinking long term. It was always short term, we'll make more money, the stockholders will be happy, I get a big bonus, and I get to retire. But it really did deteriorate our manufacturing to the point where now the Pentagon is saying, what I've been saying for a long time, we don't have domestic manufacturing to support an extended war against a military peer. That's how serious the situation is now.
Right. Not to mention our infrastructure, so house of cards and stuff like that, But I remember when the term multinational corporation started creeping into the vernacular, the vocabulary, back in the 70s. Yes. Multinational. And then poof, with no allegiances whatsoever except to, profit. So.
Yes.
All righty, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Laura in Michigan. Aloha, Laura. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I heard two possibilities why General Electric's going bankrupt. And one is they've heavily invested in those windmills, which break down. Nobody wants to fix them. They're so huge. The other one is General Electric's also wouldn't allow the nuclear plants, which are getting old, and they're starting to break down. Those two things are causing GE to go bankrupt.
Well, I know the windmills are an issue, and it's not that nobody wants to repair them. It's that they were supposed to have been designed to last for like 25 years, but they're breaking down much sooner than that. And the actual company that makes those turbines and gearboxes has gone out of business. So they literally cannot find the spare parts for it. We have wind farms here in Hawaii. We've got a fairly new one up on the north shore of Oahu. There's another somewhat older one down on the Big Island, if it hasn't been eaten by the lava yet. That one has been out of operation for a lot of years, and it's just corroding away. As far as the nuclear reactors, a lot of people were very concerned about how those reactors at Fukushima did not survive the quake and tsunami. They were designed by, and in at least part of the cases, built by General Electric. And I'm sure that that's had a negative impact on their nuclear power sales as well.
Right. I just thought I'd throw those two stories out because your caller asked about it.
Well, they
you.
Make sense. It absolutely makes sense, Laura. Thank you very much for the information. And we're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello to you both.
Thank you.
When you mentioned about the charity deal and what's going on behind the scenes, as it were, that okay, no problem, whatever, go for it. It reminds me of the aspect of why whenever we're at the store and you're asked by the cashier, would you like to donate to a given charity or whatever? It's like, no, I already give to a charity. Thank you very much. Quite frankly, I tend to go to a local charity that is asking for donations of some sort of hard goods or whatever the case might be, or soft goods or whatever, that can actually be distributed locally. And not, I mean, if someone has decided they want to give a financial donation, that's up to them. But it's not like they're looking for a financial donation, because quite frankly, who's to say where that money is going to? And apparently, that's one example of what's being done with it for selfish purposes. So that really clarifies the air about what's really going on with the passing of the buck, if you will. So, which is nauseating.
It is I agree, it's a nauseating story. All the more so because apparently the United Nations had this report of these abuses back in 2002, and it's only just now being allowed out in 2018. So, I mean, that's 16 years they sat on this story. And you're absolutely right. A lot of so-called charitable organizations turn out to be frauds, like the Clinton Foundation, obviously. There was a big stink, I think it was about 2 years ago, where there was this guy who'd set up all these cancer research charities, and they were all for profit. He didn't even have a 501c3, and just ran commercials and raked in the dough, and they spent it on themselves, and they finally caught up with him. But Claire and I are like you. We're involved in 2 local charities where we take, food and other goods over to them. We used to actually help hand it all out. Unfortunately, the Claire's choir rehearsals are on the same evening as the distribution of the food, so we can't do that anymore. But it was an eye-opening experience. It taught us that these people who are out there on the streets and hungry don't deserve to be there. They haven't done anything wrong. It's been done to them. But yeah, if you want to be charitable locally. Don't just write a check off to some, save the endangered bull elephant fund, because a lot of those things do turn out to be very shady indeed, and they're money-making scams.
Oh, on a charity-related issue that happened here on the East Coast, apparently a small town in the state of South Carolina is running into an issue after about 10 or 11 years with a artisan that did some designing for their religious institution, i.e. a church, which happens to be a Baptist church. And it's probably online somewhere, somebody will find it, where the artist did a sculpture, and then after about 10 or so years, the congregation of the church and the pastor decided that looks too Catholic. It's like, okay, when you look at a picture of the sculpture, which part looks too Catholic? The sculpture of Joshua and Joseph, otherwise known as Jesus, or the little plaques that are surrounding the figurine that was sculpted? So the question is, which is which, and why you wait until after about a decade to decide, oh, this looks too Catholic or whatever for us? I don't get the hypocrisy of this scenario, but I just thought I'd pass that by you for the hilarity of it.
Well, it's, different strokes for different folks here, and amazingly enough, I'll tell you something that kind of surprised me. Claire and I had occasion to visit a congregational church here on the island while Claire was out there trying to get other church choirs to do her music. And this one had a carved sculpture altarpiece that was very Hawaiian in terms of its composition, including the fact that the women were all sans tops, which kind of struck me as something that you wouldn't normally expect to see in a church, but this is Hawaii, and everybody's kind of relaxed about such things.
Interesting. Go figure.
Yep.
Anyway, y'all have fun. Later.
All right, talk to you. Thank you very much for the phone call. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. A lot of stuff starting to break here now. Apparently, over in Missouri, Governor Eric Greitens is expected to turn in his resignation today over a sexual misconduct scandal. Apparently, couldn't keep things zipped up there, and that has come back to haunt him. Devin Nunes is now out there calling for the arrest of John Kerry. Now, the reason he's doing this is because Kerry was engaging in unofficial diplomacy as a private citizen, trying to save the Iran deal. And while I do agree with saving the Iran deal, Kerry wasn't authorized to do that. It's a violation of the Logan Act, but Devin Nunes is now saying he should be arrested and prosecuted. And that would carry a 3-year prison sentence. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'll second that motion for arrest and prosecution.
Yes.
But, not going to hold my breath. It does seem like nobody's getting in trouble. And that caller a few days ago saying his theory that it really is just a big, huge, elaborate dog and pony show, and just to make it look like something might happen.
Mm-hmm.
Remember even that stern-looking Democrat that used to be in charge of some investigative committee? He always looks really upset and stern, as if he's going to get people in trouble. And nobody ever got in trouble, and the same on both sides.
Yeah, it is rather amazing that, even as more and more of this corruption comes on out, nobody's actually going to jail for it. Some people have lost their jobs, some people have resigned and retired, but I want to see handcuffs. I want to see prison doors slamming shut on some of these people. Nobody should be above the law in this country, and that includes the Clintons and the Bushes.
Yeah, it really is just a complete infiltration. It's like you pick up a piece of wood and it's just crawling. It's completely rotten. It's hollowed out. It stinks. It's just bugs everywhere. It's completely a lost cause. It's totally gone. But hey, I wanted to mention about Occam's razor, and so I would say that Occam's razor is out of date because it applied more in the past, and the concept was originated when, like a couple hundred years ago?
Yes.
Something like that? Yeah, okay. I'm going to argue that it's out of date because in the past, a statement such as, take your vaccines, we want you to be healthy, was actually true at some point in the distant past. But now it's completely complicated and not true. It's the opposite of what it means. In the past, when you had like a civil war, the weapons that you would have were very similar to the weapons that the government would have if you were fighting the government. Nowadays, it's completely different. The government has very complicated, like nanotech and space-based weapons. Things are much more complicated. Occam's razor was before string theory and before quantum mechanics, and so nowadays I would argue it's actually the opposite. That the most simple explanation is not the most likely one if it's referring to geopolitics, especially.
Well, obviously, I'm going to disagree with you for a wide variety of reasons. Basically, the fact that we have a more advanced technology right now does not, in fact, undermine the thinking behind Occam's razor. Yes, we have all this amazing technology, but I don't think that in any way takes away from the fact that if you're looking at multiple explanations for what you're seeing going on in front of you, that generally the simplest one is going to be the one that is correct. That's a principle that has held up very well throughout history, and the fact that we're dealing with more complex technologies doesn't undermine that. I'm sorry, I can't agree with you on this.
Fair enough. Agree to disagree. Hey, I'm working on a joke for Hawaii. I need your help here. So, who is the most unpopular? Okay, who is the most unpopular personality or person in Hawaii right now?
I have no idea.
They're a politician. They're a politician. Like, remember Obama visited before, so this would be great. Okay, I'll just do it then. So,
okay.
If Obama visited Hawaii right now, considering all the volcanic activity that is occurring, would you still say that Obama would be the biggest asshole in Hawaii?
Okay, I think that might qualify. Yes.
And then one last thing, I want to share this theory. I'm calling it theory of the morality of wealth. And so, if you go back to hunter-gatherer time, and you walked into your local community cave at night, and you just started eating eggs that you didn't help find, you would be like ostracized from that community really quick, right? That wouldn't be cool. And so the reason that we have money is just because the cave now is really big and there's millions of people in there, and money is really just a means of facilitating a fair exchange of commodities.
That's what cash and money is supposed to do, a medium of exchange.
Right.
All right, well, listen, Mateus, I got to put you on hold. We got to do another commercial. And we'll be right back. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're finishing up with Mateus up there in Canada. And Mateus, if you just sort of pick up where you left off.
Right. So before money was invented, you had to have a fair exchange, or else you wouldn't be fitting into your community. And after money was invented, and the reason money was invented was just to facilitate complex exchanges of commodities and labors.
Yes.
It's supposed to be fair. Obviously, nothing works perfectly, but it's supposed to be fair. And so nowadays, if you were to find a bag of money, let's say, and then you just go and start spending that money, according to this theory, is that that's immoral, because what that's doing is that's forcing everyone else to work and provide, and you selfishly just take. And so this would apply to any sort of wealth that comes like without very much of a give back. And this includes, it's a very controversial theory because that would include inheritance and lotteries and everything.
Yes.
But it's an interesting thing to analyze that there is an inherent immorality in kind of taking advantage of a system that's designed to be representing a fair trade of effort and to just somehow to extract out of it. And so it doesn't mean that you can't be rich and moral, but it means that if you are rich, you need to do something that's giving back to society in some way. And it could be like, it could be your wife composing music and bringing joy, pleasure to people listening to it, and there's a financial compensation and she's happy, everyone's happy. Let's say she got rich doing that, that would be moral.
Would have been nice. That didn't work on out.
That the reason, I would argue that the reason a lot of rich people are unhappy is because deep down inside, it doesn't feel good to be immoral at the core. So say some rich oil baron who inherited, some old money, and if this theory is true, their whole life is based on kind of like this gaming the system immorally. And this kind of ties into my rant about the royals before. Is like the reason I'm so down on praising the royals is because it's very immoral what's going on here, where like millions of people have to provide for a small selfish group to just be decadently spoiled, and then they don't even appreciate it because they're born into it. And we're supposed to be like mesmerized that they're spending our money. Anyways, what do you think? Is it immoral to find a bag of money and never have to work again?
No, I disagree with that, and I'd certainly love to find a bag of money. And your theory about people who are rich being inherently unhappy, I'm willing to offer myself as a volunteer to test that theory out. But no, I think money is just a medium of exchange, and some people game the system to have more of it. Some people have more of it because they're talented and skilled. And some people just flat out get lucky, and we can't ignore the vicissitudes of fortune, as it were. Mateus, I'm going to let you go here.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for giving me a try.
All right, we've got to do a network identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And hour number 3, phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to some politics here, a lot of stuff coming out today. Apparently, Attorney General Jeff Sessions has informed the White House that if President Trump fires Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, Sessions himself may quit. I don't know about you. To me, that would be a good thing. Let's get Larry Klayman in there as Attorney General. Let's get Tom Fitton in there. Let's get somebody who's going to go on in there and actually start doing the job, instead of this constant string of career cover-up artists who are there to protect the power, to protect the money. It really is a corrupt mess. That image that caller had of picking up a piece of wood and discovering that it is just totally crawling with vermin, that does serve as a good metaphor for the U.S. government here. Okay, over in Ireland, they've had a referendum, and they've just legalized abortion. Ireland, up until now, under domination of the Catholic Church, has banned abortion, and the election was an upset for the Catholic Church. And basically, they had 1.4 million votes to little over 750,000 voting no, basically abolishing this constitutional amendment that gave equal legal status to the lives of a fetus and the woman carrying it. So the vote passed with a 2/3 majority, and it surprised a lot of people. It was thought it was probably going to win, but not by that wide a margin. And of course, the Catholic clergy are very upset because, well, they were looking forward to all those little tiny children coming on into the church somewhere down the road here. So let's talk about Mother Nature here a little bit. A lot of flooding going on in Ellicott City. Huge amounts of rain. They've got something like 2 months worth of rain in just 2 days. It's just really coming on down. And it was only 2 years ago they had a similar event, and everybody's talking about the rain. But there's another factor here that everybody needs to pay attention to. Remember this last winter, we had all this record snow? It doesn't just disappear. When you have record snow, you have a record melt. And that's why there's one of the reasons why there's so much flooding going on. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. William in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
I was trying to take you off. Yeah, I was trying to get you off speakerphone.
Okay.
Are you there?
I'm here. I have to be somewhere.
Good. Well, you're a pretty smart guy. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts?
Hello? I think we just lost William. Hopefully he'll call on back. So, yeah. Boy, the longer I live in the United States, the more third world the infrastructure becomes. Phone lines aren't working very well. The internet is not reliable. The electricity is not reliable. It's amazing here. Okay, over at Whole Foods, and we have one on Oahu. They're talking about building another one. We don't know where it's going to be, and we're probably not going to show up anyway, because apparently now that Whole Foods has been acquired by Amazon, they're backing off their commitment to ensuring food suppliers inform the consumer and the store itself if their products contain GMOs. And apparently Whole Foods is walking back. They're going to rely on their advertising campaign to convince consumers that this is a healthier place to do your shopping. And it may be, but it's not as healthy as it could be. Fortunately, we have another health food store very close to us, down to earth. And they have labels from the GMO project. And at some point, I'm waiting to see when a cell phone app comes on out that can read that new QR code that is going to be part of food product labels following the establishment of a national set of standards for GMO labeling. It won't say GMO, but it will be in that QR code. And people are going to be able to use a smartphone application and just find out what is and is not GMO and stay away from that, because we just don't know what's going on there. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network, and apparently William is back. Aloha, William. Sorry we lost you that last time. What's going on?
Well, the question I was asking was, what are your thoughts on organized crime, like on a large scale? I mean, I can always read about the Italian mafia, the Chinese mafia, the Jewish mafia. These are, independently, but are these organizations united in any way on a planetary scale?
Yeah, I imagine
that
they are. I mean, we're sort of gone away from the turf wars, although some of them still exist with some of the up-and-coming drug gangs like MS-13, and you'll see that. But the older, pardon my use of the phrase, older, established organized crime families, they're very stable. They've taken their ill-gotten gains and invested them in legal enterprises, like hotels and casinos, getting into a war with other crime gangs doesn't really do anybody any good. So these days, it does seem like they tend to get along with each other. They've got their designated areas of operation, and I have to say, I'm not an expert on organized crime because I'm not a criminal, nor do I wish to be. But again, looking back at the history at the height of Prohibition and the violence that was going on there.
In the U.S.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of that anymore, except among the drug gangs.
So you make it sound like a perfect world, like these people
No, it's not a perfect world.
Stay in there.
No, that's not a perfect world. These organized crime gangs are sucking wealth out of the American economy. And whether it's white-collar crime or blue-collar crime or cyber crime, they are a burden on our society. And I don't mean to imply that I approve of them, because I certainly don't. Because
No, I understand. Okay. So I just, see that they are an element within our society. Now, if you go back to the 20s there with the Prohibition, history reveals that a lot of these people infiltrated government.
Yes.
They had judges in their back pockets. I mean, they were pretty how would you say, set up in the system.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Yes. And we saw it happen all over again with the CIA's drug running in the 1960s and 70s. Where CIA-connected drug runners are basically now implanted within our government.
Yeah, but you make it sound like it all ended at a certain period and it no longer exists.
No, I didn't say that either. I didn't say that either. I said
the date.
They seem to have reached a détente, I think is perhaps the most accurate way to describe it.
Okay, so you're saying that they're working in cooperation with the CIA, with the Mossad, with the security people in England. That there's a détente. You have to define the word détente. I guess I'm not clear.
Well, I'm saying that these organized crime groups are not fighting open warfare against each other. And it is no secret that U.S. intelligence agencies have been using relations with organized crime families going back to World War II, where the U.S. got the cooperation of some of the Italian and Sicilian mobs to help smuggle weapons into Italy prior to Italy's switching sides there. Jack Ruby was not only a CIA, he was a paymaster for the mafia. So yeah, there's a lot of crossover between them.
Well, you're saying the mafia, the Italian mafia or the Jewish mafia?
I would say in the case of Jack Rubenstein that it was probably the Jewish mafia.
So I would love to see a clear expose how these people still function in our society. Obviously, they're still there.
Yes.
You're saying there's a détente, there's no turf wars, but these people are there still.
Yeah, they are there. They are there, and they're smart enough to realize that the last thing they want to do is call attention to themselves. And they basically learned their lesson from the Roaring '20s, where some of those mafia lords, they love the publicity, and they love, the fact that the media basically turned them into stars. But that did attract unwelcome attention from government authorities. And these days, they're all kind of just keeping a low profile. They really don't want to be seen in the press. They don't want to attract attention anymore.
But in the interim, this low profile that you described, the gun running, the drugs, the child prostitution, all that business is still alive and well, right?
Apparently, yes.
Isn't that what they're... So that's what I don't understand there. You know, shouldn't the focus of the Justice Department be to root out these people?
It should be.
Unless they're in cahoots somehow.
It should be, and I remember,
right, yeah.
You know, Trump came into office saying that he was going to do something about the human trafficking issue, and we're not seeing a lot of traction on that one either, especially on the issue of sexual abuse of children. I mean, how can you... there's nobody who can argue against that policy publicly. There's no way you can stand up and say, I think we're being too tough on the child molesters. Nobody's going to go along with that. This should be the easiest agenda to implement in all of government, and yet it's not being implemented.
Well, I don't know. Trump is, what is he? He's like in the old cowboy westerns. He owned the gambling saloon, right?
Yes.
And the guy that owned the guy that owned the gambling saloon was always a slick dude that was the good guys always got him, right? In the end, in the old Western stories. Right?
Well, I'm trying to remember if there's a counter argument, but yeah, people in the Old West, I mean, people would go to the saloons, they'd go to the cat houses, they would look down on the people who worked there, but they still went and did business with them anyway.
Right. And then until somebody got really cheated out of their farm or ranch, and then the good guy would come in and shoot the saloon owner, and you know, there'd be a new election and blah blah blah, right?
Well, saloon owners are not elected. It's somebody has the money to come on in and build a saloon.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Well, anyway, I would love to be able to put it all together in like one documentary, like how these people know each other, how they relate to each other, how many of these people make phone calls, you know, like talking about wiretapping and all that surveillance bull. How many of them are actually calling our U.S. politicians? You know what I'm saying? I'd love to see
sure
those
a lot
phone
of them
records.
are. It's a corrupted system. And I can imagine that these organized crime figureheads have the resources to have secure communications. Because, like I proved before, it is possible to create systems of encryption the U.S. government cannot break. Anyway, William, thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're going to go to John in British Columbia. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. It has to do, you know, something like where the expression, you know, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yes.
Now, it's got to the point now where you can't even tell them apart. You know, because they're all in there. They're all...
I got a pretty good idea who my friends and enemies are.
Yeah, but I mean, with the way things are going, you know, Israel uses the United States to fight their battles of the countries around them.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, they're driving the country into debt. And at one point, I guess it's just going to fall apart, right? And
it looks that way.
To take over.
It looks that way. You know, we're going to be headed into Zimbabwe-style inflation here very soon.
Yeah. I don't know. I've listened to you quite often, and it's almost scary on the way things are going. It's like they're setting it up to fail, and then somebody's going to come in and take over later. You know, they'll have your FEMA camps will be in use, and they'll just put people in there. It's like Kissinger said. He says, "How are you going to get them in there?" He says, "Oh, one easy, food." They'll end up getting in there. Once they're in there, they won't be able to get back out, and that's another reason why they're want to take the guns from everybody, so they can't fight back.
Yes. It's all about preserving the status quo and preserving the power and just hanging on to power by whatever means they deem to be necessary. And a big part of the problem is that these politicians very easily conflate their own well-being, their own personal wealth and power with what's good for the nation as a whole. And that allows them to justify violating the Constitution, saying, well, it's a national emergency, the nation is under threat. No, actually, they're under threat because the voters want to take away the wealth and the power and the politicians want to hang on to that. I don't want to see a conflict in this country, though. We may get one. I get so many people who email me or call into the show saying, we can't wait any longer. I don't want to see it. I'm not going to encourage it. I'm not going to support it because I really don't think the American people are ready for a civil war in the streets of America. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
it's entirely possible.
And I agree. The politicians don't want to go there, but that's why they have they get the police with all these armored personnel carriers.
Yes.
And all those fancy weapons. I guess they know what's coming because it's sooner or later they're going to get to a breaking point, and the people are just going to say that's enough's enough, and that's what's going to happen, whether we want it or not.
Well, what is likely to happen is when there's an economic crash, the supply chain will break down. And that means people who have not been prepping will run out of food. Those supermarket shelves will be empty after just 2 days. And at that point, when people are hungry, that's when they're going to riot. And that's when the government will push on back and do what the government is really good at doing, which is killing people.
Exactly. And then that's why they like you were saying about the FEMA camps, that's how they get them in there. If you want something to eat, come on in. And then once they're in there, it's a prison. It'll be a prison for them, and they don't really realize it or won't realize it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty much what I had to say, but I listen to you quite often. Even if I miss it one day, I'll catch you up on the next day on the repeats.
Well, thank you very much. And again, the podcast system is working. If you're not able to get the podcasts, you need to empty the cache on your browser and reload. Apparently, there's a caching issue, and sometimes I think they make these things more complicated than they need to be. Anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. The lines are now open, 800-313-9443. There's been a little bit of a setback to the feminist idea that women are the equal of men, especially in the military. This happened over in Suffolk, England, and the first woman to join the infantry basically lasted 2 weeks out of an 18-week course before she was forced to drop on out. And this was basically a question of failing the physical test. She couldn't carry the loads the men were carrying. Now, I would agree that women can serve in mechanized branches of the military as pilots on board Navy ships, tanks, so forth and so on. But when it comes to the ground pounders, infantry, no. The reality of the physical differences between men and women becomes apparent. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be back with another phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a reminder that the Front Sight Training Academy promo has been extended to June 2nd, which is the end of this week. This is the last week where you're going to be able to take advantage of this wonderful offer. And seriously, if Claire and I were on the mainland, anywhere near Nevada, which is where the academy is located, I'd buy into this deal myself. It's that good. It's that good. All right, we're going to go back to the phones now. Kevin in Pensacola, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Good to speak with you. I listened to a great interview over the weekend on the Jeff Rentz program with Brendan O'Connell.
Okay.
And he went into great detail on the Massage Halpiat program. Not sure if you're familiar with that or not.
No, I'm not.
Well, basically, it's their high-tech program that they've used to put a a small microprocessor into all these other microprocessors. Since they've been using microprocessors, I think over 20 years. And what he was saying is that Israel's got a backdoor into every Intel CPU, every major chip.
No, that part I had heard, yes.
do you think that's part of the compromising that's gone on with all of our politicians? And
that's definitely part of it. The fact that Israel gets the take from the national security agencies eavesdropping without any filtering at all means that Israel, by way of the NSA, is eavesdropping on all of our politicians, digging out the dirt on them, leaving them wide open for blackmail. And I want to know what U.S. government official was really okay with this, with Israel having conduits into the private communications of America's politicians and leaders.
Absolutely. And I also wonder what they've done to other world leaders. You know, I don't think Putin is the kind of man who would take blackmail with a grain of salt, but you know, I kind of wonder if Bibi has some push on him, has some weight over him.
Well, looking at the way Putin was sort of trying to push Netanyahu away at that May Day parade, their last meeting did not go very well. And I think Putin came away, whatever they talked about, he was very angry at Netanyahu. Netanyahu was out there trying to grandstand and insert himself into Putin's moment of glory at the parade, which is why Putin pulled that veteran over and said, "You walk beside me," forcing Netanyahu to step back. So that came across as very, very frosty to me. But I don't know what's going on in these high offices. I know that blackmail is a regular tool of international statecraft, and it's kind of a reason to not have people who are blackmailable in the halls of Congress or the White House. And one of the important functions of the independent media is to find and out this kind of behavior before politicians reach too high in office, where they can then be blackmailed with it. And I'm not trying to say that we're exacting our pound of flesh or we're trying to find justice. We just need to be informed because we need our leaders, in order to do the best job they can for the United States of America, they've got to be working for the United States of America and not a foreign government who is able to blackmail them. And all this nonsense about Russia interfering in the 2016 election. If there was anybody that Russia really wanted to have in the White House, it was Hillary Clinton, because they could blackmail her with the Uranium One deal. And, you know, certainly Trump has been less than cordial with Putin. But I'm convinced that Russia really wanted Hillary in there because she was wide open to blackmail.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. Trump just succumbs to flattery. You know, maybe his intention may have been good in the beginning, but he just put himself in a position to where anybody could compliment him and get on his good side. I've got a weird question that nobody seems to be raising regarding Tommy Robinson. You know, I think he's done some really good work, but you know, who are the people that he hasn't really spent much time investigating as a journalist? And I think that's the Israelis again. And just for fun, just to humor myself, I Googled Tommy Robinson Zionist. And there's a video on YouTube where he says, straight out of his mouth, "I'm a Zionist." There's pictures of him in Israel on tanks, you know, very, very much in support of Zion. And I think that what's happening to him is great injustice, but it makes me wonder if he's maybe not a deep cover up trying to rile up the people.
Well, you know, I think what's being done to him is outrageous, and maybe it's being done to make him a household name around the planet. Anyway, listen, Kevin, we've got to let you go. We've got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as you know, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment, of course, is where the government recognizes our pre-existing right to self-defense. And the Second Amendment is not about target shooting. It's not about hunting. Those were such an important part of everyday life in colonial times. This was about military weapons with which to thwart abusive government. Well, over in New Jersey, they've become the latest state to ban the bump stocks for firearms, and they passed a bill against the accessory, which carries something like a $15,000 fine or 3 to 5 years imprisonment for people caught with these bump stocks. The deadline to turn in those bump stocks came and went last month. Not one was turned in. Massachusetts went through the same thing earlier this year. They were the first state to ban bump stocks, and only 4 people have turned theirs in. Now, I understand this is a complicated issue, but where I come down against these laws is they violate a well-known provision in U.S. law called ex post facto, meaning you cannot declare something to be a crime retroactively. So I think somebody could actually mount a constitutional challenge on that. All right, let's take a phone call. Sovereign Man, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha.
Aloha.
I just wanted to make a comment that it's Front Sight Firearms Training Institute, commonly known as Front Sight.
Okay.
A really nice place. I've been there. I would love to go back. I hear that they're getting ready to open up other facilities too.
Yeah, they're actually putting in a dormitory for people who are going to be taking multi-day training courses. They won't have to drive back down into Vegas or something.
Yeah, when I was there, we had to go stay out in Pahrump.
Yeah.
Yeah, little did I know, I was talking to this woman by the pool, and come to find out, prostitution is legal there. Yeah, I didn't partake, but
Yeah,
actually,
sure. Sure. I believe it was purely an academic study.
No. Obviously, you misconstrued.
Okay.
I actually took a special course while I was out there. It was a 4-day, 12-hour-a-day course.
Mm-hmm.
It was for like 29 pastors. So
okay.
Anyway,
I mean, like I said, if Claire and I were back on the mainland, anywhere around Nevada, I'd sign up for this deal myself.
Yeah, there's a really good video on YouTube of a guy by the name of I think his name's John Badandi. Mm-hmm. I'll drop a link in the unofficial whatreallyhappened.chattango.com chat room. He does an excellent speech on the city council in a town in New Jersey about defending his right to keep and bear arms.
Okay. I would appreciate it if you would email me the URL. I'm not using that Chat Tango window anymore. And as a matter of fact, I probably ought to just get it shut down.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are now open. Let's talk about computers a little bit here. Apparently, Microsoft has done it again with an update that is causing a lot of damage. Apparently, the Windows 10 April update could literally vanish your entire desktop. And basically, on the reboot, it comes back to a blank screen. And the only thing that you get is a message saying that the desktop is unavailable. And if you have a second computer, you can fix it and get around it. But most people, they don't have the second machine. And the screen has no icons. And it's really causing a problem. And apparently it is a conflict with one of the more popular antivirus updates. But Microsoft has definitely devolved into a company that just throws products out there and waits for the end users to complain, so they don't actually have to pay for a quality assurance department. Now, a lot of people are still responding to that little goof with Amazon Alexa, where it started recording conversations, private conversations, just about home remodeling. They were talking about hardwood floors. And it started sending those conversations to a contact in the contact list. And Amazon is saying it's just that Alexa misunderstood what was being said near to it. Apparently, the word to turn it on. Alexa has other similar words. If you have somebody named Alex in your home, it can turn it on as well. But my understanding is, not that I have one of these, my understanding is you can change the wake-up word. And you should change it to something that is very hard to misconstrue, something you're normally not going to say in conversations, like Rumpelstiltskin or Brontosaurus, or just something that is really out there to avoid this unit accidentally turning on. But a lot of people are saying this illustrates the concerns that people are having as we get all this Internet of Things into our homes. We're being surveilled, mostly for reasons of marketing stuff to us, but for the possibility of these devices being hacked for nefarious purposes, eavesdropping on our conversations to find something to blackmail us with. And no, I don't want one of these devices. I don't intend to have one of these devices. I'm perfectly okay going from room to room, turning lights on and off myself. Russia has asked Apple to help them enforce a ban on Telegram. This is a popular messaging service, and apparently regulators in Russia want to block push notifications for Telegram users in Russia, ensuring that Apple phone and tablet users do not receive alerts about new messages, and rendering the application basically a lot less useful. Now, this comes from a court ban on Telegram after the company refused to give Russia's Federal Security Service access to private conversations. And apparently Russia has also asked Apple to no longer make the Telegram app available for download in the country. All right, we're going to go to the phones again. Pete in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, tell me something. With all the stuff that Kilauea is spewing, is there any gold in any of that?
No, generally you don't find a lot of gold in hotspot volcanoes. You can find diamonds in subduction zone volcanoes and some gold there from deep down, but no, we don't see it here. In fact, a lot of people will say, well, we know there are diamonds there because there's that geological feature, Diamond Head. You can see it from the beaches of Waikiki. And the story is actually that Diamond Head got its name from a couple of very drunk British sailors who stumbled on some calcite crystals and assumed that they had found diamonds. That's where Diamond Head came from.
Very nice. My last, I'll leave you with this thought, because I wasn't going to call in, but you hit on it, and I thought, oh man, now I got to call you. The Second Amendment, I think the First and the Second Amendments are both offensive, not defensive, especially the Second Amendment. It is offensive and reminding the government employees we will be offensive. I know you're saying you don't condone any violence or whatever. I don't want to see that either, my man. Trust me. I would love to see your theory that it falls like the USSR, although I would not like to see where it is now, where we wind up with some guy like Putin running the country, as a dictator, essentially. I heard somebody on Coast to Coast last night. It was a recording. It didn't air last night, but the guy was talking about the general salaries or something in Russia now after the fall, and it's like $800 a year or a month or something like that. I'm like, well, yeah, we can't afford that either. So I don't want to see us go to violence, but I think there are enough people getting upset enough, like the earlier caller said, that something's going to happen. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, also bear in mind right now that we're already seeing the ramping up of a propaganda campaign against Russia and Putin. And I remember some of the stuff from the original Cold War back in the 1950s and 1960s. In hindsight, it was all very obviously lies. And we do need to be careful about anybody, even in the independent media, just coming on out and saying, oh, well, you know, Putin's a dictator and they're only making $800 a month. And we need to find second sources to find out how much of that is real. I mean, Putin won his last election. That doesn't sound like a dictator to me. We need to have second sources to find out what's really going on, because we know this government and corporate media, they certainly lied to us about Saddam Hussein, they lied to us about Muammar Gaddafi, they lied to us about Bashar al-Assad, and no doubt they're going to be lying to us about Vladimir Putin. Anyway, Pete, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to science, apparently Fiat Chrysler America has issued a recall for almost 5 million vehicles in the United States to fix a software bug that could lock the vehicle's cruise control. And until it's fixed, owners of some Ram pickups, Jeep SUVs, and other Chrysler and Dodge vehicles are being warned against using the cruise control. Don't they test these things before they put them out in the marketplace? All righty. And okay. As you know, there was another incident with a Tesla vehicle that basically hit a fire truck. And this was a semi-autonomous Tesla car, and it had this accident in Utah. And what investigators have discovered looking at the logs is that the Tesla Model S was on autopilot mode, and it actually accelerated before hitting that fire truck. It went from 55 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour just 3.5 seconds before it hit the truck. That sounds to me like a major software bug. And again, that's something that I don't want in my life. I'll drive my own car. I'm a very careful, very slow, pokey driver, but I'll do my driving myself here. Remember the iPhone 6 kind of came and went, was replaced by the iPhone 7. And the iPhone 6 had a problem in that people who were keeping it in their back pocket were discovering that it would actually bend. It wasn't a very rigid case at all, and if it bends enough, it quits working. And apparently, somebody has leaked a document saying that, or revealing that Apple knew the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus would bend before they went on sale, but chose to do nothing about it. These are internal Apple documents. In other words, they knew they were going to market with a product that was not going to hold up, but they just went ahead with it. And Bendgate, as it's been called, it's another case. Apple had designed a bad product, and they just went forward with it. So, 2 Canadian banks have warned customers that they've been the targets of recent hacks attempts, and in one case, the personal information of as much as 40,000 customers had been taken. This is BMO and CIBC owned Simply Financial. All right, let's grab ourselves a quick phone call here. Daniel in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, I don't really have time to call, but after a couple of your callers, I just had to add something about Vladimir Putin. On RT today, they're talking about all the British tabloids are saying that if you're gay or transsexual at the upcoming World Cup in Russia, that you're going to get attacked, stabbed, or worse, or whatever. And there's nothing to back this, because they just had about 5 major soccer events in Russia, and nothing of the sort has happened. So it's just the same scaremongering going on, and it just never seems to end.
No, the United States and Great Britain, they want the World Cup in Russia to be a failure. They can't stop it from happening. But yeah, they've been issuing all these warnings. Oh, don't go there. It's high crime. You're going to get hurt. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And we'll see if there really is an impact on attendance. But it is the World Cup, and people wait all year for this event.
Yeah, another thing too. It just seems like the British police, I'm not sure which branch, they said they were going to send their own members to the World Cup to monitor Britons for if they wave one of these flags of theirs. To, like, they say they're going to incite. Don't wave the flag because you're going to incite violence. And it's just ridiculous. It also made me think that, you know, there's going to be like British security services wandering around Russia, and I always think to myself, you know, they could act as provocateurs or stage some kind of attack. Who knows? I mean, it just makes me think, because I don't know. That's the way I'm wired, I guess.
Well, you know, in this day and age, with all the false flags that we're seeing and all the lying coming out of government and the corporate media, again, no matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up. And you're right, the World Cup would make a very tempting target for some incident to try and ignite a war. Anyway, listen, thank you for the phone call, Daniel. We're going to let you go. We're going to take a commercial break. Back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, last segment of our program today. So let's get caught up on our erupting volcano. Earlier this morning, there was an ash ejection from Kilauea, went up to 15,000 feet. That's pretty serious. The ash, for the most part, is falling to the southwest of Kilauea crater. But there's a lot of activity going on there. In fact, I'm looking at the current quake map around Kilauea, and there's just hundreds of quakes here. It's a very serious situation. Now, down in the pardon me, Eastern Rift Zone around Leilani Estates, state authorities are getting very, very concerned. They're starting to lose roads. They've had to close off 137 and now 130. There's a little dirt track down along the coast that people are using to get in and out. And apparently the military now has Sea Stallion helicopters stationed on the Big Island to get people out. And the authorities are getting very frustrated because there are, amazingly, some residents who are simply refusing to leave. And I can understand this is their home, this is their life, but this is an active volcano. And the lava is much hotter, much more liquid, it's flowing much more rapidly, and it's a major eruption. There's no question about that. And the police don't want to literally, you know, handcuff people and take them out of their homes, but they are becoming concerned at the number of people on the Big Island who are just not willing to leave their homes. Okay, okay, it was Highway 132, not 130. And this is between Lava Tree Park to Four Corners. But this is a big eruption. And like I said, some years ago, Claire and I went down to the Big Island, took my nephew down there, dangled him over a volcano. See, that's what they look like. And we visited Kaanapali, which is the remains of the last big major Kilauea eruption. And it is amazing to see. So after a couple of years and things cool down, you know, come on out here and take a look. Unfortunately, apparently, the way the media is covering the story has seriously impacted our tourism industry, and apparently bookings are now down by half, which is an overreaction. And I want to reiterate, okay, all of this is happening on the Big Island, on the southern edge of the Big Island. And there's a lot to the Big Island that is still unaffected by the eruption, including Hilo, Captain Cook, that whole area on up to the Aiea, and the rest of the Hawaiian Islands. Yes, we've got a little fog in the air. We can feel it in our eyes. But there's still stuff to see out here. And we're still a moderately decent place to vacation, ignoring the fact that they banned all the clothing optional beaches some years ago. And it does look like the lava is going to hit that power station. It's already overtaken one of the high pressure wells there. So 270 earthquakes in just one day. The mountain is rocking and rolling. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he has lots of things to share with you. Please take what you're learning here and at the website and share it with everyone that you know. We need to push back against the media propaganda that is leading us into another war. Please donate and support Republic Broadcasting. Please donate and support whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.